Owen Pritchard was on the porch of our bungalow at 1:30 in the morning, and his shirt was wet to the bottom hem, and his feet were bare, and there was river mud between his toes. I had Sarah behind me with her hand on my shoulder. The hand was not shaking. The rest of her was shaking. The night past the screen was a hot, wet wall of black. Owen was smiling. He had been standing on the porch waiting. I did not know how long. The smile had been on his face for hours. The smile was a fixed thing. The smile was a shape his face had landed on and stayed on. Owen was inside the smile somewhere, and Owen was not in the eyes. The eyes were the same color and the same shape, and behind them there was something looking out that had not been Owen for some number of days. I would never be able to count exactly. I knew it then. I had not known it. An hour earlier I had not known it. That morning. I knew it now. The bag on Sarah's shoulder was packed. The microscope she always brought was inside the bag. The slide with the sample I had gone to the village to get was inside the bag. We had been about to walk out of the bungalow and across the lawn and into the trees and down a trail to where Caetano's uncle had left us a canoe 2 miles of forest away. We had been about to do that very quickly and very quietly, because for 30 straight minutes Sarah and I had been on the same wavelength, the kind of wavelength a husband and a wife who have been married long enough get when they both know in their stomachs that the next thing they do has to be done right. We had not done it quickly enough. Owen looked at me. He looked at Sarah behind me. He looked at the day pack on Sarah's shoulder. He kept smiling. Sarah lifted her hand off my shoulder. She put it on my wrist instead, then on my forearm, then on my chest. She was telling me to back up. There was nowhere to back up to. The bungalow was a small wooden box with 1 door and 2 screen windows, and Owen was filling the doorway. Owen took 1 step forward. A week earlier I had won a trip. The parking lot of the Verizon wireless store on Veterans Boulevard in Metairie, Louisiana, on a Thursday afternoon in August was the kind of hot that makes the asphalt soft under your shoes. I was standing next to my truck with my tie loose and an envelope in my hand, and I had just called Sarah, and Sarah was crying on the other end of the phone. The good kind of crying. The kind where her voice catches and goes high and she has to put the phone down for a second to laugh. I had won the district sales contest. Top seller. Out of 87 sales representatives across the New Orleans metro region and the Mississippi Gulf Coast and the parts of southern Alabama Verizon classified as part of our market, I had moved the most lines, sold the most home internet, hit the highest gross ad bonus pool. The reward this year was not money. The reward this year was a trip, 2 weeks in Brazil, all expenses paid. Flights, lodging, food, an eco-retreat. A lodge on a private oxbow lake in the Amazon, 2 days by boat upriver from a city called Manaus that I had never heard of until I read the brochure. The corporate brochure used the word retreat 14 times in a single page and showed a photograph of a wooden bungalow over still water with a hammock on the porch and a green parrot on a railing. Sarah had not been on a real vacation since the year before we got married. That was 6 years ago. 6 years was the number that mattered to me when I read the brochure. 6 years was the number I had been carrying around without knowing it. Sarah worked 60 hours a week at the Tulane lab. She had a degenerative disease research focus that I did not fully understand, and that she did not bring home much, the kind of work that makes you tired in a way that does not show on the outside. I sold phones. I sold phones well. I had been doing it for 4 years since I left a long stretch of bouncing between jobs in my 20s, and I was 36 now, and I had finally found the thing I was good at. The trip was not really the reward. The crying on the phone was the reward. Hal McElroy, the district manager, was standing in the open doorway of the store watching me. He was a heavy man with a red face who had been in cell phone retail since the mid-1990s and who liked me because I worked Saturdays without complaining. He gave me a thumbs up from the doorway when I caught his eye. I nodded back. Through the phone, Sarah was already saying she had to call her sister to take Ruby for 2 weeks, and then she had to call her mother, and then she was going to need to file for the time off at the lab right now because they were funny about international travel for someone whose research involved controlled substances, and her voice was running fast the way her voice runs when she is happy and trying to put a list together at the same time. I let her talk. I leaned against the truck. The asphalt under my shoes was the temperature of bath water. A pickup with Plaquemines Parish plates pulled into the lot. A woman got out with 2 children in the back. She was going to come into the store and ask about a screen replacement, and I was going to be her sales rep in about 90 seconds. I told Sarah I had to go. She said she loved me. I said I loved her. I put the envelope in the inside pocket of the cheap suit jacket I kept in the truck, and I went back inside. The store smelled the way our store always smelled, which was the smell of a vacuumed carpet that had been vacuumed for the 11,000th time, and the slight chemical smell of new phone packaging, and the smell of Hal's coffee from the back office. I helped the woman with the screen replacement. I sold her son a new case. I went home at 9 that night, and Sarah had already made Grouper's penny for dinner, and a bottle of wine open on the table. The cheap kind we drank on regular Thursdays, the kind from the grocery store. And she had the laptop open on the kitchen island with the lodge website on the screen, and her finger was tracing the trail map, Solstice Lodge, Cocha Negra Reserve. 2,000 acres of private rainforest, the website said, owned and operated since 2020 by an American expatriate and his Brazilian wife. We sat at the island and ate. Ruby was under the table chewing on a rope toy. Ruby was a 5-year-old red-tick coonhound my sister had given us after a foster fell through. She had 1 bad ear that drooped and 1 good ear that stood. She was sleeping in our bed within an hour, every night, no matter where we put her at lights out. Sarah pointed at the screen. She said, "Mike, look, we can swim in the lake." She said it the way she said anything she did not quite believe. I said, "We can swim in the lake." She said, "We can swim in a lake in the Amazon in August, with monkeys." I said, "We can swim in a lake in the Amazon in August, with monkeys." She said, "We will not eat the monkeys." I said, "We will not eat the monkeys." She closed the laptop. She looked at the closed laptop for a long time, longer than was needed to look at a closed laptop, and then she said in a smaller voice, "We have not done anything like this. We have never done anything like this. I do not know what to bring." I said, "Bring what you need." She said, "I do not know what I need." She got up. She put both plates in the sink. She ran the water and rinsed the plates and turned off the water and stood there for a second with her hands on the edge of the counter looking out the kitchen window at our small backyard. The magnolia and the gas grill under the cover and the line of azaleas her mother had planted when we first bought the house. I came up behind her and put my arms around her. She leaned back against me. She said, "I am going to bring my microscope." I said, "You are not bringing your work microscope." She said, "Not my work microscope, the little one, the one from grad school, the portable. I always bring it. I do not even take it out, mostly. I just like to know it is in the bag." I said, "You are not going to need it." She said, "I know. I just like to know it is there." I said, "Okay." Ruby came in and pushed her nose against the back of Sarah's knee. Sarah laughed. She bent down and rubbed both of Ruby's ears, the good one and the bad one, in equal time, the way she always did. That was the last quiet night. 2 days of travel. New Orleans to Houston to Sao Paulo to Manaus. The Sao Paulo airport at 4 in the morning local time was the loudest quiet I had ever been in. Hundreds of people moving slow across a marble floor. Spanish and Portuguese and a Korean tour group near our gate, and one little girl in a green dress trying to push a luggage cart that was twice her height. Sarah slept on my shoulder for an hour on the bench by the gate. The fluorescent lights above us flickered once and then steadied. I thought about the fluorescent lights above the back office at the Verizon store, the one that had been about to die for 3 months, and I thought Hal had better get someone to change that before I get back, because Hal was not going to do it himself. Then I thought, I have 10 more days of not thinking about Hal. Then we landed in Manaus. and I never thought about Hal again on that trip. Manaus from the airport was a city the size and color of unwashed limestone laid out on a green river. The driver who took us to the marina drove fast in a car that smelled like cigarettes and pineapple. The marina was full. Boats of every size, fishing boats and tourist barges, and one canoe that had a man and a dog and a small generator strapped down in the bottom. Our pickup was a long, thin riverboat painted white with a dark green roof and the words Solstice Lodge in vinyl letters on the side. The captain was a man named Caetano, who was probably 28 or 29 and who shook my hand without smiling, and who took Sarah's bag from her and stowed it under a bench without me having to ask. We left Manaus at noon. The Rio Negro is wide for a river. Where the Rio Negro meets the Solimões, the two waters run side by side for several miles without mixing, one black and one tan, and you can see the line between them from the riverbank. Caetano slowed the boat to show us. He pointed without speaking. Sarah took out her phone to film it. She had not slept enough on the plains, and her face was puffy on one side from leaning on me. She filmed for about 30 seconds, and then she said, "Look how clear the line is. It is unreal." Caetano said, "Two different rivers." He said it in English with a slight accent. He had not said anything else in English yet, and so it surprised me. I had assumed we would have to gesture for 2 weeks. I said, "You speak English?" Caetano said, "A little." He did not speak much more for the next 30 hours of boat travel. We slept on the bench seats in our clothes the first night, with mosquito coils burning at our feet. We ate beans and rice and some kind of grilled fish out of a tin pan that Caetano warmed on a small camp stove. The riverbanks got higher, and the river got narrower, and the boats we passed got fewer, and the houses on the banks got farther apart. By the second afternoon, we had not seen another boat for 2 hours. I asked Caetano if that was normal. Caetano said, "Yes." Then he said, "In this season." Sarah pointed out something I had not registered, the bird noise. She said the bird noise had been very loud the first day and was quieter today. She said the second day going upriver should be louder if anything, not quieter, because we were further from the city. I had not been paying attention to the bird noise. I started paying attention. She was right. The trees were thick on both sides of the river, and the trees were full of green, and the green looked the way the brochure said it would look, and there was almost no bird song coming out of any of it. Caetano did not look at us when Sarah said that. He kept his eye on the river ahead. We pulled up to the lodge dock at about 4 in the afternoon on the second day. The lodge was a long, low building with a green metal roof and a screened porch facing the Cocha. The Cocha was about half the size of a high school football field, oval, the bank shallow on the lodge side and steeper on the far side where the jungle came right down to the water. The water was the color of strong tea, poured over a dark wood floor. It was almost completely still. "Black Mirror," I said to Sarah as the boat slowed. Sarah did not laugh. Sarah said the water in the Cocha would have almost no flow and a high concentration of tannins from the forest leaf fall, and the surface tension would be unusual. I loved her then for the way she answered jokes with facts. I would love her later for the same reason, and for other reasons, but the loving her then was the first time I would later remember loving her on that trip. A man was standing on the end of the dock waiting for us. He was tall and lean, with sun-bleached hair the color of straw, and a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His face was tanned in the deep way of someone who has lived in the tropics for 20 years. He waved both arms over his head when he saw us. He waved the way you wave to people you have known a long time. He said, "Mike and Sarah Doucette." He said it loud across the water before our boat had even tied up. He pronounced it Doucette the right way, which was a thing most people in the United States got wrong when they read it. He grinned. He had very straight white teeth. He said, "Welcome to the end of the world. Owen Pritchard. Pleased to meet you." I shook his hand. His handshake was firm, but his hand was cold. His hand was cold in the Amazon at 4 in the afternoon in August. I noticed it, but I did not think about it then. I thought, this guy probably has poor circulation, like my Uncle Ray. Sarah said, "We are so glad to be here." Owen Pritchard said, You are the only guest this week. The other couple canceled last minute. Family emergency. Anyway, you have the whole place to yourselves. Caetano, give me a hand with their bags. Caetano did not look at Owen. Caetano lifted our bags onto the dock without a word. The dock was wood planks gone gray with the years. The pilings were rotted at the waterline. Owen walked us up the dock to the lodge, and we passed a long shelf of white river stones laid out next to the bank, the kind people lay out for decoration, and on top of the river stones was a single dead dragonfly. It was a big dragonfly, the big black kind, with a red thorax. It was on its back. It had not been there long. Its body had not yet been taken by ants. Owen did not look at the dragonfly. He kept walking. The lodge had 4 guest bungalows behind the main building, connected by a covered wooden walkway. Owen put us in the one furthest from the lodge, which he said was the quietest. The bungalow had a king-size bed under a mosquito net, a small bathroom with a tile floor, a ceiling fan, a window that looked out into the green of the jungle on one side, and a window that looked out across the lawn at the Cocha on the other. There was a hammock on the small front porch. Owen left us to settle in. Dinner at 7, he said. Cocktails at 6. I make a hell of a caipirinha. When he had gone, Sarah set her bag down on the bed and went into the small bathroom and ran the tap. She let the water run. She tasted it from her cupped hand. She came back out and said, "The water is fine. It is on a filter. He told me at the dock." I said, "You did not ask him." She said, "I did. While you were getting your bag." I said, "You move fast." She said, "I am thirsty." I lay back on the bed in my clothes. The ceiling fan was on and pushing the mosquito net out and back in a slow rhythm. Sarah lay down next to me. We held hands. We did not say anything for a while. Then Sarah said, "Did you notice how Owen pronounced our name?" I said, "He pronounced it right." She said, "Yes, but he did not ask how to pronounce it. He just said it." I said, "He probably asked Caetano on the radio." She said, "Caetano did not say a word the whole boat ride." I said, "Then he asked how? Or the corporate office? Or somebody?" She said, "Maybe." She said it the way she said anything she did not believe. We slept for an hour, and then we got up and washed and went up to the lodge for dinner. Owen made caipirinhas. He told us a long story about how he had bought the property in 2012 from a Brazilian timber concession that had gone bankrupt. He had been an engineer in São Paulo before that. He had hiked half the Amazon basin in his 20s. His wife was named Inez. She was visiting her mother in Belém for a month. We would not meet her on this trip. That was a shame, Owen said, because Inez was the real soul of the place. He said this twice. The real soul of the place. The dinner was tambaqui, a river fish, grilled with lime and farinha. Owen ate with us. He ate quickly and put his fork down between bites in a precise way, and laid the fork at the exact same angle every time. I noticed it without thinking about it. I noticed it the way you notice anything when you have been selling phones in a small store for 4 years and have learned to read which customer is about to walk out without buying. He set his coffee cup down at the end of the meal, holding the handle with 2 fingers, and he set it down so softly the cup did not clink against the saucer. He looked up at us, and he was smiling. The smile lasted about 2 seconds longer than smiles usually last between courses. Sarah said, "Owen, can I ask you a question?" Owen said, "Anything." Sarah said, "We did not see many birds today on the river. Caetano said it was the season. Is that true?" Owen looked at her for a beat. Then he laughed. He laughed a little too loud for the small dining room. He said, "Caetano is a romantic. Caetano thinks the river is a person. The river is not a person. The birds move with the rains. The big rains were late this year. The birds are out farther. They will come back." Sarah said, "Okay." She did not believe him. I could see it in her shoulders. She did not press it. We finished dinner. Owen poured us each a small glass of cachaça. We drank it on the porch and watched the Cocha go from copper to red to the color of nothing, just darker than the trees. The howler monkeys started their evening call somewhere far out in the trees. The call of a howler monkey is one of the strangest sounds in the world. It is not a monkey sound to a person who has not heard it. It is the sound of wind coming through the air vents of a building you should not be in. It moves up and down and around the building. It moved up and down and around the lodge in the same way. Owen said, "You will get used to it." We did not get used to it. We went to our bungalow and lay down under the mosquito net and listened to the howlers. Sarah fell asleep first. I lay awake for a long time. The fan turned. The howlers called. The Cocha out the side window was perfectly still. There was a moon out, almost full, and the moon was reflected in the Cocha exactly, not broken up, not rippling, a perfect circle on the surface of the water. At 3:20 in the morning I woke up. I do not know what woke me. The fan was still on. Sarah was still asleep, breathing the slow way she breathes. The howlers had stopped. The night outside was almost completely quiet except for the small clicking sound of insects in the eaves, which I did not register until later, because the thing my brain had snapped awake to was a sound from the Cocha. Not a splash, not anything that loud. A sound like a body wading slowly out of still water. I lay on my back for about a minute and listened. The sound stopped. Then it started again. Then it stopped. I got up. I went to the window that faced the Cocha. I pressed my face against the screen. The Cocha was the same. The moon was still on it. There was nothing in the water that I could see. The lawn was empty. The dock was empty. The lodge was dark. I stood there for what I think was 4 or 5 minutes. The sound did not come again. I went back to bed. Sarah did not wake. I lay on my back with my eyes open until the sky outside the jungle window went from black to the color of wet ash, and then I fell asleep. In the morning I had decided I had dreamed it. I had not dreamed it, but that was what I had decided. Breakfast was eggs and a bread that Owen called pão de queijo, which was small soft rolls made with cassava flour and cheese that pulled apart in your fingers. Owen was talkative. He told us Caetano was going to walk us to the local village that morning. The village was a 40-minute walk through a graded trail in the forest. The villagers were used to small groups of guests coming through. They sold beadwork, Owen said. Inez had set up the partnership 4 years ago. The villagers were Cocama and Yagua mixed, mostly Cocama, and they spoke a kind of Portuguese with some Cocama words mixed in. Caetano would translate. Caetano had grown up in the village. I said, Caetano grew up there. Owen said, yes, his grandmother is still there. I said, you hired him from the village. Owen said, he came to me. He wanted the work. There is not much work out here. He is a good kid. Quiet. Hard worker. He smiled when he said the word quiet. He held the smile a beat too long. Caetano was waiting for us on the dock when we came down. He had on the same shirt as the day before, but he had a thin machete and a leather sheath at his hip, and he had a small canvas bag over one shoulder. He nodded at us. We followed him into the forest behind the lodge. The trail was wide enough for one person. Caetano led. I went second. Sarah went third, close behind me, which Sarah does whenever she does not know the ground under her feet, the way she stayed close behind me the one time we hiked at Yosemite 3 years ago. The forest closed over our heads. The light went from the wet, bright morning light at the lodge clearing to a soft green half-light under the canopy. There was almost no underbrush. Big trees with smooth trunks went up out of the ground like the columns of a long hallway, and the floor of the forest was packed dirt and old leaves and the occasional bright fungus, orange or yellow, the size of a saucer. There were no birds. I noticed the no birds about 10 minutes in. I said, hey, Caetano. Caetano said, yes. I said, where are the birds? Caetano said, there are birds. I said, I do not hear any birds. Caetano did not answer right away. He walked 20 more paces. Then he said, some seasons it is like this. He said it the way you say a thing you have agreed to say. Sarah said, behind me, very quiet so that Caetano would not hear, Mike, look. I stopped. She pointed off the trail to our left. About 30 feet off the trail, there was a dead spider monkey on the forest floor, or what had been a spider monkey. The body had been there a while. The fur was gone in patches and the ribs showed, and the head was turned to one side. There were no flies on it. There were no ants. There was a small black puddle of something around the head that did not look like blood. It looked like ink. We caught up to Caetano. We did not mention the monkey. The trail came out of the forest at the edge of a clearing, and the clearing was the village. About 22 houses, all small, raised about 3 feet off the ground on wooden stilts, the walls of split palm and the roofs of palm thatch. A central open packed dirt area with a fire pit and 3 plastic chairs in a row. A bigger building at the far end of the village that I would later learn was the school. A long open shelter at the near end of the village where, on a normal day, the women of the village would have been weaving bracelets and necklaces to sell to lodge guests. On this day there was no one in the shelter. I saw an old woman sitting on the porch of the second house on the right. She was looking at us. Her hands were in her lap. They were folded. I saw a man inside the third house on the right, through the open door. He was lying on a hammock. His feet were hanging off the side. He was looking at the ceiling. He did not turn his head when we passed. I saw a child, maybe 7 years old, sitting on the bottom step of the fourth house on the right. The child was barefoot and was wearing only shorts. The child's hand was open and palm up in his lap, and there were 3 small stones in his hand. He was looking at the stones. He did not look up at us. I saw a young woman walking from the fire pit to one of the houses with a clay bowl in her hands. She walked the way a person walks, who is concentrating on not spilling something. The bowl was empty. I saw an old man on the porch of a house at the back of the village. He was looking at us. He was not folding his hands or doing anything else. He was just looking at us. He held our eyes from across the village for as long as we were in his line of sight. There were a few other people in the village. There were several houses with their doors closed. Caetano walked us straight across the central area to the porch of one of the houses. An older woman came out, maybe 65 or 70, short and broad with gray hair and a long braid down her back. She wore a faded blue dress. Her face was lined, and her dark eyes were sharp. Caetano spoke to her in Portuguese for a long minute. She listened. She looked at us. Then she looked harder at Sarah. She held Sarah's eyes for a long count. Then she turned and went back inside her house. Caetano said, "This is my grandmother. Her name is Inez. Doña Inez. She will make coffee. Please come inside." Sarah said, "I thought Owen's wife was named Inez." Caetano said, "Yes, my grandmother is also Inez." Sarah looked at me. I looked at her. We did not say anything. We followed Caetano up the steps and into the house. The inside of Doña Inez's house was one room. A bed in one corner with a thin mattress and a folded blanket, a wood-burning stove on a brick platform, a small table with 2 chairs, a shelf with a few clay bowls, a metal pot, a knife, 3 glass jars, a photograph on the wall in a wooden frame of a young man in a Brazilian army uniform from a long time ago. I would later learn the young man was her son, who had died in a logging accident in 1991. Doña Inez set 3 small enamel cups on the table. She poured coffee from the metal pot. The coffee was black and very strong and slightly sweet, the sweetness already in it from the pot. We sat down. Caetano stood by the door. Doña Inez stood. She did not drink her own coffee. She watched us drink. Sarah said, in English, to Caetano, "Please tell her thank you." Caetano translated. Doña Inez nodded. We sat for a moment. Then Doña Inez said something in Portuguese. Caetano translated. He said, "She wants to know if you are sick." Sarah set her cup down. She said, "No, we are not sick. We just arrived yesterday." Caetano translated. Doña Inez said something else. Caetano hesitated. Then he said, She wants to know if you have eaten or drunk anything from the village. I said, no, just this coffee. Caetano translated. Doña Inez nodded once. She said something to Caetano in a sharper voice, and Caetano nodded and then turned to us. He said, she wants you to know that you can drink the coffee. The coffee is from her stove. The water for the coffee is from a rain barrel on her roof. You can drink water from a rain barrel. You should not drink water from the Cocha. You should not eat any food from the village kitchen at the lodge. Sarah said, we have been eating food at the lodge. Caetano said, from the lodge kitchen. Yes, the lodge kitchen uses lodge water. Lodge water is from the well. The well is okay, my grandmother thinks. The well is far from the Cocha. The food is okay. I said, you think? Caetano said, she thinks. She is not sure. Nobody is sure of anything right now. Sarah said, there's a fever. Caetano said, yes. Sarah said, a lot of people in the village have it. Caetano said, yes. Sarah said, I am a scientist. I work in a lab in New Orleans. I study the brain. I can look at people, if it would help. I cannot fix anything, but I can look. Caetano translated. Doña Inez looked at Sarah for a long time. Then she shook her head. She said something in a quieter voice. Caetano said, she says, do not look. Looking is how it knows you. She says, finish your coffee, take this, and go. Doña Inez reached into a pocket of her dress and pulled out a small carved wooden thing about the size of a thumb. She put it on the table in front of Sarah. It was a human figure, simple, no features, no face. Just the shape of a body, with the arms held tight at the sides, made of dark wood, worn smooth, the kind of thing that had been carried in a pocket for years. Sarah said, I cannot take this. Caetano translated. Doña Inez said something short. Caetano said, she says, yes, you can. Sarah picked it up. She held it in her closed hand. It seemed like it had a weight that was a little more than a thing that small should have. We thanked Doña Inez. We finished the coffee. We left the house. Caetano walked behind us this time. As we crossed the central area to leave the village, I felt eyes on the back of my neck. I turned. The old man on the porch at the back of the village was no longer on the porch. He was standing at the edge of the central area, about 40 feet behind us. He had walked there without my hearing him. He started toward us. Caetano put a hand on my back. Caetano said, keep walking, slow. We kept walking. The old man caught up to us at the edge of the trail. He was breathing slightly hard. He was not looking at Caetano. He was looking at me. He said, in English, you drink the lodge water, not the river water. Yes, not yet. I said, I am sorry. The old man said, you drink the lodge water, not the river water, not the Cocha water. You boil what you do not know. You boil everything. You do not put it in your mouth without boiling. I said, yes. Okay. The old man said, you have how many more days here? I said, 12. The old man said, too many. Caetano said something to the old man in Portuguese, sharp and fast. The old man did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on me. He said, you should leave today. Then he walked back into the village. He walked with a slight limp. He did not look back at us. Caetano said, come, the trail. Let us go. We walked back through the forest to the lodge. None of us spoke for the whole walk. We came out at the lodge clearing, and the lawn was bright green in the noon sun, and the Cocha was the same flat mirror it had been at dawn, and the lodge looked exactly like the lodge in the brochure photograph, and Owen Pritchard was standing on the porch with a glass of something cold in his hand. He waved. Owen called out across the lawn, how was the village? I said, nice. Quiet. Owen said, quiet is the word. Caetano, can I borrow you for a minute, brother? The dock pump is acting up. Caetano gave Sarah and me one short look. He went up to the porch, Owen put a hand on his shoulder, friendly, and walked him around the side of the lodge. Sarah and I went to our bungalow. We closed the door. Sarah locked the door. There was a flimsy hook latch, and she slid the hook into the eye. It was the kind of latch you could break with a hard push. She sat on the edge of the bed. She still had the small carved figure in her closed hand. She opened her hand and looked at it. Then she set it down on the nightstand. She said, "Mike, we need to talk." I said, "Yes." She said, "That woman knew something." I said, "Yes." She said, "The old man knew something." I said, "Yes." She said, "Caetano knows something." I said, "Yes." She said, "Owen does not act like a man who runs a lodge." I said, "No." She said, "There is something in this place." I said, "Yes." She said, "And it is not in our bungalow yet." She lay back on the bed. She put her hand over her eyes. She breathed out for a long time. Then she sat up. She said, "Okay, we finish out today like a normal vacation. We do not draw attention. We do not pack. We act like nothing happened. Tomorrow morning I am going to ask Owen if I can see the medical kit, because I told you on the trail I twisted my ankle and we need to check it. Then I am going to look at his logbook. He keeps a logbook. He told me on the dock yesterday when you were getting your bag. He said all good lodge operators keep a logbook of guest health." I said, "You told him you were a scientist." She said, "Yes." I said, "Why did you tell him that?" She said, "'Cause I wanted to know what his face would do." His face did the thing I did not like. He smiled too long. She put her hands in her lap. She said, "Mike, I am scared." I said, "I know. I am too." She said, "Promise me we leave on day 5 if we can find a way to leave on day 5. I said, "We leave whenever you want." She said, "Day 5. I said, "Day 5. She lay back on the bed and put her arm over her eyes again. The ceiling fan turned. Outside the bungalow window the Cocha was as still as it had been in the morning. The dragonfly on the white river stones was still there. The lawn was empty. That night at dinner Owen drank. He drank more than the night before. He talked about politics. He talked about Brazilian politics, which I did not follow, and then he talked about American politics, which I followed less than I should have, and then he talked about something he called the Great Pivot, which he said was coming, and which was about energy and water and food and what he called the rebalancing of human population centers in the next 40 years. He talked about it like it was a thing he had thought about a lot. He talked about it the way certain customers at the store talked about cryptocurrency, with a fixed gleam in the eye. His left hand was flat on the table next to his plate. I watched his left hand for almost 9 full minutes without seeing it move. Then a fly landed on the back of his wrist. Owen did not move his hand. The fly walked from his wrist to the base of his thumb. Owen did not move his hand. The fly stayed there for almost a minute. Then the fly flew away. Sarah saw it too. She did not look at me. She did not have to. After dinner we said good night. We took 2 cups of coffee with us back to the bungalow. We did not drink them. We poured them down the bathroom sink and rinsed the cups. At 2:10 in the morning, Sarah got up to use the bathroom. She came out. She stood at the window that faced the Cocha. She stayed there a long time. I sat up. I said, "What is it?" She said, "There is somebody on the bank." I got up. I came to the window. There was a figure standing at the edge of the Cocha at the property line where the cleared lawn met the wild forest. Just standing, not moving. The moon was up, and the figure was a shape against the silver of the water. From the lodge it was about 120 feet away. We could not make out a face. We could see that it was a person. A tall person. A man. It was not Caetano. Caetano was not tall. I said, "Owen." Sarah said, "I cannot tell." I said, "He is not moving." Sarah said, "He has not moved since I came to the window." We watched. The figure did not move. I started counting in my head. I counted to 200. The figure did not move. I said, "We need to go to bed." Sarah said, "I cannot go to bed." I said, "We need to go to bed because there is nothing we can do about it and we need to be rested in the morning. Tomorrow, you go to the logbook. We act normal." Sarah looked at me. She nodded. She let me lead her back to the bed. We lay down. She held my hand. She did not sleep. I did not sleep. The figure was still standing at the edge of the Cocha when I checked the window again at 4:15 a.m. The figure was gone when the sky started to lighten at a little after 5:30 a.m. There was no sound of footsteps on the gravel path. There was no rustling in the brush. The figure was just no longer there. In the morning, when I went to the bathroom, I almost did not see the wet footprint. The bungalow floor was a dark, stained wood, and the print was already mostly dry. A single bare foot, right foot, pointed away from the bed and toward the door, adult-sized, right in the middle of the floor, between the bed and the front door. I looked at it for a while. I went and got the small towel from the bathroom, and I wiped the floor. I did not tell Sarah. I did not know yet what to do with knowing it. I told her later. I had to, but I did not tell her that morning. That morning I let her have the cup of coffee from the thermos we had brought from home, the only coffee we drank that day, and I let her think we still had 2 days to act normal before we left on day 5. We did not have 4 days. Day 3 was the day Sarah saw the logbook. We had breakfast at the lodge with Owen. Owen was hungover. He drank black coffee and ate nothing. He told us he had a small dock repair project for the morning, and that Caetano had gone down river in the small skiff to a fish camp to buy some peacock bass for our dinner. The skiff would be back by mid-afternoon. We could swim in the Cocha if we wanted, he said, or walk the trail on the south side of the lodge clearing, which was clear of marked paths, but pretty enough for a stroll. We were not to go into the forest without Caetano. "Snakes," Owen said. "Plenty of them. I am not running off into the trees to suck venom out of your leg." He grinned at his own joke. The grin was a long one again. Sarah said, "Owen, I twisted my ankle a little on the village trail yesterday. Do you have any kind of medical kit?" "Just an ace bandage, something to wrap it." Owen said, "Of course. Come on up to the lodge office after breakfast, and I will set you up." He took her up to the lodge office after breakfast. I did not go. I stayed on the porch and pretended to read a paperback I had bought at the New Orleans airport. Sarah came out about 12 minutes later with her ankle wrapped neatly in an elastic bandage that was loose enough to slip off. She walked across the porch to me. She did not limp. She sat down. She said, "He keeps the logbook in the second drawer of the desk. The drawer is not locked. There is also a satellite phone in the cabinet behind the desk. There is a small medical refrigerator with about half a dozen vials. I do not know what is in the vials yet. I will photograph the labels later." I said, "How?" She said, "He said he is on the dock for an hour with Caetano. He has a project. I am going to go back up to the office for a glass of water from his filter. He said, 'Help yourself any time.' I will photograph what I can." I said, "Sarah." She said, "I know. I am scared. I am going." She went. She came back in 15 minutes. She did not say what she had photographed. She took the wrap off her ankle and put it in the drawer of the nightstand. She put her phone face down on the bed and looked at it for a second, like she was afraid of it. Then she said she was going to lie down and look at her photos, and I should leave her alone for a while. I left her alone. I went down to the dock. Owen was indeed working on a small pump motor at the end of the dock with a wrench. Caetano was not back yet. I sat on the end of the dock for a long time and watched the water. The Cocha did not ripple. The dragonfly on the white river stones had been joined by another dragonfly. The new one was on its side. Its wings were spread out. Its body was the same too, still kind of dead. The skiff came back at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Caetano tied up. He had 2 big peacock bass on a stringer. Their bodies were a green so deep it was almost black, with the orange and red markings that give the species its name. They looked normal. Caetano gutted them on a board at the side of the dock and tossed the guts into a bucket. He did not throw the guts into the Cocha. He carried the bucket up to the lodge. I noticed. I had not seen him put any guts into the Cocha at any time. I had not seen anyone put anything into the Cocha. There was no fishing in the Cocha. There was no laundry done in it. There was no dog at the lodge that drank from it. There were no boats on it. Nothing was put into the Cocha. Things only walked into the Cocha. I sat with that for a few minutes. Then I went up to the bungalow. Sarah was sitting on the bed with her phone in her lap. She had a piece of paper from the lodge office notepad on the bedspread next to her with handwriting on it. Her own handwriting. She had been copying. She said, "Mike, come look." I came and sat next to her. She said, "Owen's logbook goes back about 3 years. It is mostly nothing. Guest arrivals, allergies, the occasional fall, sprained ankle, food poisoning. The book is split into sections by year. The current year section is most of what I photographed. Look, 6 weeks ago, on the page for the week of June 19th, there is a note that says, Petrobras survey crew, 8 men, 3 days, Cocha sediment study. Owen wrote it." Then about 10 days after that, there is the first entry that says, "Village fever, Senhor Marcio, mild." About a week later, there are 3 more village fever entries. Maybe a week after that, 6 more. Then the entries stop being numbered. They start being descriptive. By the entry from about 2 weeks ago, Owen is writing about, quote, behavioral effects we should research further, and, quote, Inez would call this the manifestation, and then a sentence I do not understand, which is, quote, "I do not think she was wrong about the Cocha, and I do not think she will be coming back from Belém." I said, "Owen's wife." Sarah said, "Yes." I said, "He told us she would be back at the end of the month." Sarah said, "Yes, he did." I said, "He was lying." Sarah said, "I do not think he is even living in the same room as the truth anymore. I do not think he can lie or not lie. I do not think it works the way it works for us." I looked at the page she had been writing on. She had copied phrases from the later entries. The handwriting in the entries had been getting worse, she said. The most recent entries were almost not handwriting anymore. Letters made of straight lines, not the rounded, loopy way most people write. Letters that looked like they had been drawn by somebody copying letters they did not know how to read. Sarah said, "He is changing. We have been having dinner with a man who is no longer a man." I said, "Sarah, look at me." She looked at me. I said, "We do not have to wait for day 5. She said, "Yes, we do. We do not have a boat. Caetano takes the boat downriver. We cannot walk out. We are over 100 miles upriver from anywhere. We have to go with Caetano. We have to ask Caetano to take us out. We have to ask him at the right moment. We cannot put Caetano in front of Owen and force a fight. We have to be smart." I said, "Okay, day 5. She said, "Day 5. I went back out on the porch. I sat in the hammock. I tried to read the paperback. I could not focus on a single sentence. I closed it. I sat in the hammock and watched the Cocha and thought about my dad. My dad had been a shrimp boat captain out of Lafitte in the 80s and 90s. He had run his own boat for almost 15 years before he sold it and went to work on offshore platforms. He had told me when I was a boy that the worst thing about the open Gulf was not the storms. The worst thing was a flat calm in the middle of a hot day. He said, "Son, when the Gulf is flat and you cannot see anything moving on it, that is not the water sleeping. That is the water listening." He said, "When the water listens, you do not put your hand in. You do not even spit in it." He had laughed when he said it. I had been 7. I had laughed too, but I had remembered it. I was thinking about that on the porch when Caetano walked across the lawn toward me. He had his canvas bag over his shoulder and his machete on his hip. He nodded at me. He did not stop walking. He kept walking past the porch, and into the small clearing at the edge of the lodge property where the trail to the village began. He paused at the head of the trail. He looked back over his shoulder at me. He did not speak. He did not gesture. He just looked at me. I got up. I followed him into the trees. We did not walk to the village. About 15 minutes in, he stepped off the trail onto a smaller trail I would not have seen on my own. We walked another 20 minutes. The forest got denser. We came out into a small clearing at the edge of a stream. There was a fire pit in the clearing. There was a low log set as a bench. The old man from the village was sitting on the log. He was looking at the fire pit. He did not look up when we entered the clearing. Caetano said something in Portuguese, the old man answered. Caetano said to me, "This is my uncle. His name is Eligio. He is the man you talked to in the village yesterday. He will speak with you. He speaks English better than my grandmother. I will go back to the lodge and I will tell Owen you went for a walk on the south trail. You can find your way back. The trail is the trail. You came in, you go out the same way." I said, "Caetano." Caetano said, "Yes." I said, "Are you sick?" Caetano looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Not yet." He turned and walked back into the trees. I sat down on the log next to Eligio. The old man did not look at me right away. He kept looking at the fire pit. The fire pit had old ashes in it. There were small pale stones at the bottom of the pit. They were arranged in a circle. Eligio said, "Sit." He said it as if I had not already sat, as if he was permitting me. He said, "You have heard the Cocha at night." I said, "Yes." He said, "You have seen Owen Pritchard at the Cocha at night." I said, "I have seen a man standing at the edge of the Cocha at night. I do not know who it was." He said, "It was Owen Pritchard." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because there is only one of them at a time at the Cocha. Until the day there are many. We are not at many yet. We are not at many because most of the village is still strong enough not to walk in. They are sitting on their porches. They are watching the water from the porches. They are still themselves. They are still themselves, but they cannot walk away. They sit and they wait. Owen is past sitting. Owen walks in at night. Owen walks out before the morning. Owen does not remember that he walks in. He thinks he is sleeping in his bed. I said, "How long has Owen been doing this?" Eligio said, 4 weeks, maybe 5. I said, "And the village?" Eligio said, 6 weeks. The first man, Senor Marcio. He was fishing on the river. Not in the Cocha, on the river. The Petrobras people had come and gone the week before. They had used the seismic on the Cocha bottom. They had been hired by the federal government to assess oil potential. The men from Petrobras did not get sick. They drank only their bottled water. They left. About a week after they left, the first villager went down to the river to fish, and he came home and was tired. 3 days after that, he could not get out of his hammock. A week after that, he was standing at the Cocha at night. The fever was the first sign. We thought it was a fever. It is not a fever. I said, "What is it?" Eligio set both hands on his knees. He looked at me for the first time. His eyes were a very dark brown, almost black, and the whites were yellowed with age. He had a small scar on his lip and a longer scar on his forearm that ran from his wrist almost to his elbow. He said, "There was something sleeping in the Cocha. The Cocha is an oxbow lake. It was once the bend of the river. The river moved. The Cocha was cut off. The mud at the bottom of the Cocha is older than the mud anywhere else in this part of the forest. The thing that sleeps in the Cocha was put there by people who were not people a very long time ago. Not the first people. The first people came after. The thing that sleeps in the Cocha is not from here." I said, "From here, where?" He said, "From the earth. The thing that sleeps in the Cocha is not from the earth. The people who put it there were not from the earth. They came, they looked, they did not like what they found. They left. They left this behind. They left it behind by accident or because they could not take it back. I do not know which. The stories my grandfather told are not specific about that. The stories my grandfather told are very specific about other things. He told me that the thing is patient. He told me that the thing does not want our bodies. The bodies of the things that put it in the Cocha are not the same as our bodies. Our bodies are too small. Our bodies are too soft. Our bodies are wrong for it. But our bodies have a thing inside that is the right size and the right shape and the right material for it. The thing inside our bodies that is the right thing is the thing it wants. It does not want what is in your hand. It does not want what is in your chest. It wants what is in your head and what is behind your eyes and what is under the back of your tongue. It wants the soft part. It wants the part that thinks. I said, and it eats it. Eligio said, no, no. It does not eat. It does not have a mouth. It does not have hunger. It is not a creature. It is a... He stopped. He searched for the word in English. Then he said, it is a worker. It is a tool. It is something the people who came here used for. He stopped again. He said, for changing the inside of a thing to be useful to them. They built it to do one job. The job is to change the inside of a soft body until the soft body is no longer in charge of itself, and then to use the soft body to do the work they need done. I said, but they left. Eligio said, yes, they left. The tool stayed. The tool slept. The tool was, he made a gesture, in a kind of envelope at the bottom of the Cocha, a capsule, a jar. The seal in the jar lasted thousands of generations. Then the Petrobras people came. The Petrobras people did not break the seal on purpose. The seal was not made for the kind of pressure the Petrobras seismic charges make. The seal cracked. The tool came out. The tool is now in the water. The tool is in the mud. The tool is in the fish that swim in the Cocha. The tool is in the air above the Cocha when the Cocha breathes at night. The tool is in the village now. The tool is in Owen Pritchard. The tool is in everyone who has been near the Cocha for more than a few days without protection. I said, what is the protection? Eligio said, there is no protection that I know of, except not being near the Cocha. Drinking the lodge well water is okay so far because the well is far from the Cocha and the water is from deep ground. The lodge food cooked with lodge water is okay so far. The river water is not safe because the Cocha drains into the river when the rains come and we are coming up on the rains. The animals of the Cocha are dying because the tool does not want them and so it changes them and they cannot live changed because they are too small. The birds are gone because the air over the Cocha is not safe for them in some way. I do not understand. The trees are still fine because the tool does not want trees. The Cocha itself is fine. The Cocha is the Cocha. The Cocha is where the tool is comfortable. He stopped. He took a long breath. He looked at the fire pit again. He said, I am telling you this because my nephew told me you are not yet sick. I am telling you because the woman with you is not yet sick. I am telling you because the woman with you is a scientist who studies the soft part of the body that thinks. I am telling you because the people I love are sitting on porches in a village that is going to walk into the Cocha all at once when the tool is ready, and when it does, the tool will have more of itself than it has had in a very long time, and after that I do not know what happens, but I do not think it will stay in this part of the forest. I think it will go where the people go. I think the village walking in is the beginning of something. I want you to leave. I want you to leave today. I want you to go back to your country, and I want you to be afraid for the rest of your life, and I want you to never come back here. But I want you to leave so the woman with you can know what is happening and can tell other people what is happening, because I do not have a way to tell other people what is happening. And the people from Petrobras are not going to come back to this place for many months, and even if they did, the village will be gone by then. I sat without speaking for a while. I said, my wife wants to leave on day 5. We are on day 3. Eligio said, I do not know if you have until day 5. He showed me his forearm, the long scar. He said, I was supposed to walk into the Cocha when I was 6 years old. There was a man before me, my older brother. The tool came once before in our family stories, a long time ago, maybe 200 years. My grandfather knew the signs. He saw the way my brother had started to go still, and he understood. And he cut my brother's throat, and he sank my brother's body in the river. Not the Cocha, the river. So the river would carry him away from this place. He did not have time to do it again with me. He took me upriver to my mother's people, and we stayed away for 10 years. I came back when I was 16. My brother is dead, but not in the Cocha. The tool did not get my brother. My grandfather is dead, but not because of this. My grandfather died of cancer in 1986. The tool went back to sleep after my brother. The seal held. For a long time I thought the seal would always hold. The Petrobras people did not know what the seal was. They would not have known how to keep it intact. It is not on any of their maps. It was on no map. My grandfather had no map. He had the story of the Cocha and the song that goes with the story, and the song was not safe to teach to anyone. He taught me the song anyway because he had no son to teach. I did not teach it to my nephew. I did not want him to know it. The song is a song about not knowing. The song is a song about agreement. The song is a song about a hole that is also a mouth, and a mouth that is also a hole. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. He said, "You go back to the lodge now. You walk normal. Do not run. Do not look back. Do not tell Owen you have spoken to me. Do not tell Caetano. Caetano knows, but Caetano cannot help if Owen sees you change toward him. Get your wife. Tomorrow night, late, come down the trail to here. There is a small canoe behind that tree." He pointed. "I have hidden it. I will not be here. I will be at the Cocha. I will be doing what I have to do. You take the canoe. You go down the small stream that runs behind this clearing. The stream comes out at the river 2 miles from the lodge. It is not safe, but it is more safe than the lodge dock. From the river, you go downstream. You will reach a Kokama village in about 20 miles. They have a working radio. They will not be sick. They are too far. You ask them for help in English, and one of the women there speaks some English. Her name is Vanessa. Tell Vanessa I sent you. Tell her I said, you have to leave." I said, "Eligio, what are you going to do?" He said, "I am going to walk into the Cocha with my people." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because some of them are my blood. Because I do not want them to walk in alone. Because there is a song I have not finished singing. Because I would rather walk in than wait on a porch like the others." I said, "You said the tool goes where the people go." He said, "Yes." I said, "Then walking in does not stop it." He said, "No. Walking in does not stop it. Nothing I do tomorrow night stops it. You stop it. You and your wife. You get out and you tell people who can come back here and burn this forest down before the rains, and after that I do not know. I have done what I can do. I have not done enough. I will not do enough. I am sorry. Go." I got up. I walked back to the lodge. I walked normal. I did not run. I did not look back. I told Sarah everything Eligio had said. I told her in the bungalow with the door latched and the ceiling fan turned to high to mask our voices. I told her about the brother. I told her about the seal at the bottom of the Cocha. I told her about the Petrobras survey. I told her about the song that was about a hole that was a mouth. I told her the words as best I remembered them, and she made me say them 3 times. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mike, listen to me. I believe Eligio. I do not believe him because he was convincing. I believe him because I have spent 10 years looking at the way neural tissue degenerates in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and Parkinson's and Huntington's and a dozen other diseases that have a recognizable shape. And the shape of what is happening here is not the shape of any of those. And Eligio's description matches what I would expect a non-biological pathogen to do if such a thing existed, which it should not. And the only way I do not lose my mind tonight is if I look at a sample of it under my microscope. Because if I do not look at a sample under my microscope, I am going to spend the next 60 years remembering this trip and wondering if I made it up, and so are you." I said, "Okay." She said, We are going to take Eligio's canoe tomorrow night. Yes. But before we go, I need a sample, and I need to look at it, and I need to know what I am taking out of this place. Because the worst case is that we get to the Kokama village and we tell them what is happening, and they call for help, and the rescuers come up here and burn this forest down like Eligio said. And somebody from a Brazilian university or some United States university or some pharmaceutical company gets a sample and brings it home and starts studying it without knowing what it is. The worst case is we get out and the thing comes home with us anyway because we did not tell people loudly enough. I cannot tell people loudly enough if I have not seen it with my own eyes. I said, where do we get a sample? She said, from a person who has it, from a person in the village. I said, we are not going back to the village. She said, you are going back to the village. Tonight, after dark, you are going to get a hair sample, or a saliva sample, or a piece of skin, anything that has cells in it, from a porch, from a person who is sleeping, from a chair where someone has been sitting, anything. I said, Sarah. She said, I know, Mike, I know. She put her hands on my face. She held my face. She said, you can do this, and come back, and I will look at what you bring, and then we will sleep for a few hours, and then we will go. And I said, okay. We waited out the rest of day 3. We had dinner with Owen. Owen drank again. He did not eat. He looked at the food on his plate the way a person who has forgotten what food is for looks at food. He pushed it around with his fork. He set his fork down at the precise angle. He sweated in the air conditioning. He looked at Sarah for too long once. Sarah did not look at him back. She talked to me about a movie we had seen 6 months ago and laughed at her own joke. I laughed at it too. Owen smiled. The smile lasted 3 full seconds longer than it should have. After dinner, Owen excused himself. He said he was going to bed early because he had a headache. He smiled when he said headache. He said it like the word was a joke between him and the rest of the room. Sarah and I went back to the bungalow. We waited until 11:30 p.m. We watched the lodge from the window. The lights in Owen's quarters at the back of the lodge went out at 10:40 p.m. We waited another 45 minutes. The Cocha was perfectly still. The howlers were calling somewhere far. No figure stood at the bank yet. I put on dark clothes. I tied my shoes tight. I put a small plastic bag in my pocket and a small pair of tweezers from Sarah's travel kit. I told Sarah to lock the door behind me. I told her to lock the door. And I told her to not open the door for anybody but me, even if the person knocking sounded like me. She said, how will I know it is you? I said, I will say the word groupers. She said, groupers. I said, groupers. I went out into the night. I crossed the lawn at the back of the bungalow and slipped into the trees at the edge of the property, and I found the trail. And I went down it slow, with the headlamp on its dimmest red setting, the kind of red light Sarah's father had used when he had taken Sarah camping as a girl. I had Sarah's headlamp, because Sarah had insisted I take the headlamp. The trail in the dark was a different trail. Things you do not see in daylight are everywhere in a rainforest at night. A toad the size of a dinner plate sat in the middle of the trail, with white spots on its back like the spots on a domino. A spider hung in a web at face height across the trail, and I had to duck under it. The howlers stopped calling for a while, and then started again, much closer this time. There were no birds. There were no birds. I came out of the trees at the edge of the village clearing. I crouched. I watched the village for a long time. The fire pit in the central area was cold and dead. The houses were dark. The shelter at the near end of the village, where the women would have been weaving, was empty. The bigger building at the far end was dark. There were people on porches. I could see the shapes of them. Old people mostly, sitting, not moving. The old woman who had been on the porch of the second house, on the right, when we had walked through. She was on the porch now. sitting, hands folded, looking out into the dark. I crawled. I went around the perimeter of the village. I came up to the back of one of the houses where I had seen a man in a hammock looking at the ceiling. The hammock was still there. He was not in it. The hammock was empty. I do not know where he had gone. I did not want to know. I went around to the porch of one of the houses where the door was closed. There was a chair on the porch with a small woven blanket folded on the seat. There was a long black hair stuck to the back of the chair where someone had been sitting. I used the tweezers. I pulled it free. I put it in the plastic bag. I closed the bag. I started to back away. A board creaked under my foot. The board was a porch board, not a forest board, and the creak was small, but it carried. I froze. A voice came from inside the house. It was a low voice. It was an old voice. It said one word. It said, Eligio. It said it like a question, like the speaker had been expecting Eligio to come. I did not breathe. I did not move. I waited until I had counted to 30. The voice did not speak again. I backed off the porch slowly. I crouched. I crossed the back of the village. I made it to the trees. I made it to the trail. I made it back to the lodge clearing at a little after 1 in the morning. I came up to the bungalow. I tapped on the door, soft. I said, "Groupers." The door opened. Sarah pulled me in. She locked the door. She put her arms around me and held me for a long count. She was shaking. She said, "Did you get something?" I gave her the bag. She took the bag to the small folding table by the side window. She had set up her travel microscope, the one she always brought, the one that had been on the trip with her to French Guiana 8 years ago and on 3 other field trips since. It was a small thing, about the size of a hardcover book, with a battery-powered light and a slide stage. She had a slim case of slides open next to it. She put the hair on a slide with a drop of saline. She put a cover slip over it. She slid the slide under the lens. She adjusted the focus. She looked. She did not say anything for a long time. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her. The ceiling fan turned. The coach out the side window was still. Somewhere far out in the trees, a single bird called once and then did not call again. Sarah said, very quietly, "Mike." I said, "Yes." She said, "Come look." I came and looked. I am not a scientist. I have looked through a microscope twice in my life, both times in the 8th grade. I did not know what I was supposed to see. Sarah told me what I was looking at. She said, "This is the root section of a human hair. You can see the bulb. That is normal. That is what you would expect on any hair pulled out of a head. Now look at this part here." She moved the slide a tiny amount. This here, the cells around the bulb. Those should be cuboidal epithelial cells. They are not. The cells around the bulb of this hair are not any cells I have ever seen. They have nuclei in them, but the nuclei are arranged in a pattern that looks like the pattern of an Islamic tile floor. The pattern is made of straight lines and angles. Living cells do not arrange themselves like this. Living cells do not have straight lines. Everything in a cell curves. Everything in tissue curves. There are no curves in this. None. I looked. I did not see what she was seeing. I saw small shapes I could not interpret. Sarah said, "Watch the pattern. Watch it for a minute." I watched. At first, nothing happened. Then I saw what she meant. The pattern was not still. The pattern was very slowly changing. The angles were shifting. The lines were redrawing themselves. The redraw was so slow you could miss it if you looked away for 10 seconds. But if you watched, it was moving. Sarah said, "It is not random. I have been watching it for an hour. The pattern is responding to the light of the microscope. When I turn the light off, it pauses. When I turn the light on, it resumes. It is also responding to the heat of the slide stage. It moves faster when the stage warms up. It is doing something purposeful. It is solving something. It is computing." I said, "Sarah," she said, I know. She turned the microscope light off. She straightened up. She put both hands flat on the table. She breathed for a few seconds. She said, Mike, whatever this is, it is not from here. I said, I know. She said, I have to think for a minute. She sat on the edge of the bed. She put her hands over her face. She did not cry. She did not make any noise at all. She sat that way for what was probably 4 or 5 minutes. Then she said, we go. Tonight, not tomorrow night. I said, Eligio said tomorrow night. She said, I do not care what Eligio said. We are going tonight. We are going right now. I am going to pack the microscope and the slides and the tweezers and the plastic bag and one change of clothes, and we are going to walk out of this lodge and take Eligio's canoe, and we are going down the stream right now. I said, it is 1:30 in the morning. She said, yes. I said, we will be on the river in the dark. She said, yes. I said, okay. We packed in silence. We did not turn on the bedside lamp. We worked by the small light of our phones. She put the microscope in the padded sleeve and into her day pack. The slides went in the case and into a side pocket. The plastic bag with the hair went into the slide case. She zipped everything. She put on her shoes. I put on mine. I put my hand on the door latch. The latch made the small click it had made every other time I had opened the door. I opened the door. Owen Pritchard was standing on the porch. He was about 3 feet from the door. He had been standing there waiting. I do not know how long. He was wearing the white linen shirt he had been wearing at dinner, but the shirt was wet. The bottom hem of the shirt was dripping. His pants were wet, his hair was wet, his feet were bare. There was river mud between his toes. He was smiling. He looked at me. He looked at Sarah behind me. He looked at the day pack on Sarah's shoulder. He said, you should not go yet. I did not move. I had the door open in one hand. I had Sarah behind me with her hand on my shoulder. The porch boards under Owen's feet were wet where he stood, and the wet had soaked into the wood in a circle. He had walked across the lawn from the Cocha, and he had not bothered to dry his feet. His eyes were the way his eyes always were, and also not. The color was the same. The shape was the same. The thing behind them was different. I could see it the way you see that a friend you have not seen in a year has lost weight. It was not in any one feature. It was in the whole. Owen said, you should come in. We can talk. I said, we were just going for a walk. Owen said, at 1:30 in the morning, with your wife's research equipment in her bag. He smiled. The smile lasted. He said, please come back in. I am not going to hurt you. I would not be able to hurt you even if I tried. The thing in me is not built to hurt. The thing in me is patient. Please, sit. We can talk. I would actually like to talk. I did not move. Sarah did not move. I felt her hand on my shoulder tighten. Owen said, if we do not talk now, you are going to do something foolish. You are going to run. You are going to try to take the canoe behind the clearing where Caetano's uncle is sitting tonight. I know about the canoe. I have known about the canoe since the day Eligio put it there. Eligio is not as careful as he believes he is. Eligio is also not as alone as he believes he is. Caetano is my employee, Mike. Caetano is also the grandson of a woman who is now sitting on her porch waiting to walk into the Cocha. And Caetano is also a young man who would like very much for what is in his grandmother to be in him too. Caetano told me about the canoe last week. Caetano told me about the trail behind the small clearing. Caetano tells me everything. Please, please come in. He took one step forward. I took one step back. I pulled Sarah with me. I did not close the door. I did not have time to close the door. I did not want my back to the door if he was going to come through it. Sarah said, behind me, in a clear voice, Owen, can you sit down? Owen said, yes. Of course. He walked into the bungalow. He sat in the wicker chair by the window. He sat the way he always sat. He folded his hands in his lap. He looked at us. We backed up to the foot of the bed. We sat on the foot of the bed. I kept my hand on Sarah's hand. The door of the bungalow was still open. The night was a hot, wet wall of black past the screen. Owen said, I want to tell you what is going to happen tonight. I want to tell you so you do not waste any more energy. The thing in the Cocha is what Eligio told you it is. He is a good source. He has parts of the story right. He has parts of it wrong, because his grandfather had parts of it wrong. The story is older than his grandfather and gets thinner the further back it goes. What is true is the thing was put here by people who are not from here. They were not curious about us. They did not even notice us. We were not here yet. They were here to do work. The work was not work of the kind we do. They were grading the floor of an ocean that does not exist anymore. The thing in the Cocha is one tool out of many. Most of the tools they took with them when they decided this place was wrong for what they were trying to build. This one they did not take. It is not clear to me, even now, whether they could not take it or whether they did not bother. I do not have access to all of their memory yet. I have access to some. I said, You have access to their memory? Owen said, Yes. They left a memory in the tool. The tool sings the memory when it is awake. I can hear it singing. The villagers can hear it singing. Sarah, you cannot hear it yet because you have only taken a small amount of it in. Mike, you cannot hear it because you have taken in less. You took in some, of course. The fish dinner the first night used Cocha water salt. There is Cocha water salt in everything Inez ever cooked. Inez is a wonderful cook. Inez taught me how to cook here. Inez is not in Belém. Inez is in the Cocha. Inez went in 3 weeks ago. Sarah said, very quietly, Why did you tell us we could stay? Owen said, Because Verizon paid us a great deal of money for this trip. Because canceling would have been suspicious. Because the corporate office in Sao Paulo would have demanded an explanation. Because I am not, in any moment of this conversation, free to do otherwise. I am doing what the tool wants. The tool wants you here. The tool wants Sarah here because Sarah is what the tool has not had access to in 70,000 years, which is a person who can describe the tool's own behavior in technical language to other persons who can describe it. The tool has access to my memory. My memory contains my education in mechanical engineering. My memory contains a great deal of information about ground machines and oil exploration. My memory contains a working knowledge of 3 languages. My memory does not contain the language Sarah's memory contains. The tool would like to have that language. The tool would like to be inside Sarah's mind, looking at her own work for it. Sarah said, And me. Owen said, You are useful, Mike. The tool would like to have a top sales representative as well. The tool wants to move. The tool needs to move soon. The tool will need to move through the world the way the world moves through itself, which is by people. The tool does not understand commerce or distribution. The tool wants to understand. You sell phones. You sell phones to many people every day. The tool would like to understand how you do that. The tool is patient. The tool will take its time learning from you. He was smiling. He was smiling the whole time he said this. He said, You are not in a hurry. You think you are not. The thing on your shoulder, Sarah, the bag, the microscope, the hair sample, the tweezers, all of it, none of it is going to make it out of this room. You will not throw any of it into the water. You will not run. In about 3 minutes, you will both feel a heaviness behind your eyes. Sarah will feel it first, because Sarah was downwind of the Cocha for most of the day today, and Sarah went into the lodge office, which I have arranged to be a place where the air is heavier in the way that is useful to me. Mike will feel it about 10 minutes after Sarah. You will both lie down. You will both sleep. When you wake up tomorrow, you will know what I know. You will know it because it will already be in you. You will not be afraid of it, because the fear is in a part of you that the tool will have rearranged. It does not hurt. It is a relief. There is no version of this where you go home and live your old lives. There is only this. I am sorry, in the part of me that is still me. That part is small. That part is shrinking. By the morning, that part will be gone. Sarah said, "How long do we have to act?" Owen said, "About 1 minute." I said, "Sarah, go." I picked up the wicker chair next to the bed. I had not been a violent man in my adult life. I had been in fistfights as a teenager in Lafourche Parish, when I had still been a kid who did not know better, and I had once thrown a man out of the Verizon store in Metairie who had been threatening Hal, and I had once split a customer's lip in self-defense in the parking lot of the same store. That had been it. I had not picked up a chair to use as a weapon before in my life. I picked up the chair. I swung it at Owen Pritchard. I swung it at his head. Owen did not duck. He did not lift an arm. He looked at me with the same gentle smile. I hit him with the chair. The chair broke. The chair broke because it was a cheap wicker chair, made for the lodge, made to sit in. The seat collapsed inward, and the legs splintered, and the back came apart at the joints. Owen tipped sideways out of it and onto the bungalow floor. He hit the floor with the side of his head. He did not put a hand out to break his fall. He lay on the floor on his side. He looked at me. He was still smiling. The smile had a thread of dark blood at the corner of it now. He was breathing. He blinked. He said, in a voice that was thicker, "You are wasting time." I said, "Sarah, run." We ran. We ran out of the bungalow. We ran across the porch. We ran across the wet patch where Owen had been standing. We ran across the lawn. We did not go toward the dock. We did not go toward the lodge. We went into the trees behind the bungalow, and we found the trail, and we went down the trail in the dark with the headlamp on its dimmest red setting. I was in front. Sarah was behind me with the day pack thumping against her back. We ran. We did not hear footsteps behind us. We did not hear anything behind us. That was the worst part. It took us, I think, almost 40 minutes to get to the clearing where Eligio had brought me. We were not running by the end. We were stumbling. Sarah had hit her knee on a root about halfway. She was limping. We came out of the trees into the clearing, and the moon was on the fire pit, and the stones around the pit were exactly where they had been in the afternoon. The log was empty. Eligio was not there. The canoe was where he had said it would be, behind the big tree at the far edge of the clearing. It was a small wooden canoe with 2 paddles laid in the bottom. A long handle of rope was tied to the bow. I dragged it down to the edge of the stream. The stream was shallow at the clearing edge, but ran into a wider channel about 10 feet downstream where the water was deeper. Sarah got in. I pushed the canoe off the bank. I got in. The canoe rocked. I steadied it. I picked up a paddle. Sarah picked up the other. We pushed off into the current. The stream was narrow. The branches of trees hung over it. We had to duck once, and then again. The current was slow, but the current was there. The headlamp showed us about 10 feet of water at a time, in red. The water under the bow ran the same dark color the Cocha had been, but moving, which I told myself meant the water was the river system, not the Cocha. I do not know if that was true. For about 30 minutes we did not speak. The only sounds were the paddles in the water and our own breathing, and somewhere far behind us, the howlers, who started up again as if they had been waiting for us to pass before they began. Then we heard the village. I do not know how to describe what we heard. I can describe what we did not hear, which would be more accurate. We did not hear screaming. We did not hear splashing. We did not hear running feet. We did not hear voices. We heard, instead, a soft rustling sound from a great distance to our left, behind the trees, the sound of many feet on packed dirt. The sound was unhurried. The sound went on for a long time, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then the sound stopped. Then there was a moment of perfect quiet. And then there was a sound I had only heard once in my life before, when I was a boy and I had been on my father's boat in the Gulf in a flat dead calm, and a school of menhaden several thousand fish. Strong had broken the surface all at once, 100 yards off the bow and gone back down again. The sound of many bodies entering still water at the same time. The sound was almost gentle. The sound was almost ceremonial. Then there was no sound at all. The howlers stopped, the insects stopped, the wind stopped. Sarah said, "Behind me in the canoe. Mike, do not stop paddling." I did not stop paddling. We were a long way down the stream when the howlers started again. The forest around us went back to the sounds of a normal forest at night. The frogs began to call. The insects came back. A bird called from somewhere up the bank. It was the first bird I had heard in 3 days. After a while the stream widened and the trees opened up and we came out into the broader water of the Rio Negro. The Rio Negro, at 4 in the morning, was the size and color of a slow black highway. The moon was almost gone. The sky in the east was beginning to be lighter. We turned the canoe with the current and we paddled. The current carried us. We did not have to paddle hard. We made good time. Around 6 in the morning I told Sarah we could stop for a few minutes if she needed to. She did not want to stop. She wanted to keep going. She had not said much since we left the stream. She was paddling steady. Her face was set the way her face was set when she was trying not to cry at something that was happening to her at work. I said, "Sarah." She said, "Yes." I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No." I said, "Will you talk to me?" She said, "I am going to talk to you. I am not ready yet." We paddled. It was 8 in the morning when we saw the first house on the bank. It was a stilt house with a tin roof and a small dock and an aluminum skiff tied up at the dock. A woman in a yellow dress was on the dock pulling a fishing net out of a barrel. She straightened up when she saw us. She lifted her hand. She waved. It was a normal wave, the kind of wave a person gives another person. I waved back. I started crying. I had not been crying since we left the clearing, and I had not let myself feel it. I felt it now. Sarah behind me reached forward and put her hand on my back. She said, "Mike, look at my wrist." I turned. Sarah lifted her left arm. The sleeve of her shirt had ridden up on the back of her left wrist where there had been nothing yesterday. There was a small mark. It was about the size of a quarter. It was not a bruise, it was not a rash, it was a pattern of straight lines and angles, very faint, like a tattoo that had been done with very thin ink and then almost completely faded. It was not moving, it was just there. It was the same pattern she had shown me on the slide. She said, "I do not know when. I have been trying to think when." I think it was the village coffee, or I think it was the hair sample when I had it on my fingers and rubbed my eye in the night without thinking. I think it could have been the lodge food. I do not know. I have been thinking about it since we got in the canoe. I said, "Sarah?" She said, "I do not feel sick." I said, "Sarah?" She said, "Mike, I do not feel sick. The mark is on me, but I do not feel sick. I feel like myself. I feel like I am thinking. I do not know what that means. I do not know if it means I have it and it is being slow with me, or if it means the mark is something else, or if it means I will turn in 3 days, the way Owen turned. I do not know what it means. I do not know." She put her arm down. She put her hand on the paddle. She started paddling again. She said, "We get to the Kokama village. We tell Vanessa. We use the radio. We go." I said, "Sarah?" She said, "We go, Mike. We will figure out the rest after we go." We paddled. The Kokama village did not matter in the way the rest of it had mattered. The village was about 20 miles downriver from the lodge. The woman in the yellow dress on the first dock pointed us further down. We reached the village by mid-morning. Vanessa was a school teacher, about my age, with short hair and a calm face. She listened to us in English in the back room of the village clinic. She listened without interrupting for almost 40 minutes. She nodded when we were done. She did not ask any questions about what we had seen. She did not say she believed us. She did not say she did not believe us. She used the radio to call the marina office in Manaus. She arranged a fast boat to come up. She gave us water from a sealed bottle. She gave Sarah a long sleeve to put over the wrist. She did not ask why Sarah wanted the long sleeve. She had looked at the wrist when Sarah showed her, and she had not said anything, and she had stood up and gone to a cabinet and brought back the sleeve. When the fast boat came in the late afternoon, Vanessa walked us to the dock. She had a small package in her hand. She gave it to me. She said, in English, "This is from Eligio. He told me you would come. He came here 3 weeks ago and gave this to me and told me a man and a woman would come." I took the package. It was a small carved wooden thing, wrapped in cloth. I did not unwrap it until much later. When I did unwrap it, I found a small figure of a person, about the size of my thumb, made of dark wood, smooth, with the arms tight at the sides. No face. The twin of the one Doña Inez had given Sarah. They went together. They had always gone together. We never learned what the two of them were supposed to mean when they were paired. Nobody we asked knew. I carried one in my pocket from that day forward. Sarah carried the other. We did not know what they did. We carried them anyway. The boat took us to Manaus. Manaus took us to Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo took us to Houston. Houston took us to New Orleans. We did not sleep on any of the flights. Sarah's wrist was covered the whole way. We landed at Louis Armstrong at 4 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and my sister picked us up at the curb, and Ruby was in the back seat. And Ruby put her head in Sarah's lap, and Sarah cried for the first time since we had left the lodge. The first week back was almost normal. That was the strange part. Sarah took the rest of the week off from the lab. I took 6 days off from the store. Hal told me on the phone that he was glad I had a good time and that I should take all the time I needed, that I had banked enough hours that nobody upstairs was going to complain. We slept a lot. We ate poached eggs and toast for most meals. We sat on the couch in the evening and watched the channels of the basic cable package we had not canceled yet, mostly the Home Improvement channel, because it was the kind of programming where nothing real happens and nobody yells. Ruby slept across our feet. We told my sister. We had gotten food poisoning on the trip. We told Sarah's mother the same thing. Sarah called the Tulane lab and told her department chair the same thing. She said she would email the workup of what she had seen as soon as she was strong enough to write it up. She wrote up nothing. On the third day home, Sarah went into her home office and closed the door. She stayed in there for 3 hours. When she came out, she sat down at the kitchen island and she said, "Mike, I have looked at the slide again, and I have looked at a sample of my own blood drawn from a finger prick, and I have looked at a hair from my own head. I will tell you what I found." I said, "Tell me." She said, "The slide from the hair I took at the village still shows the pattern. The pattern is still slowly moving. It has been moving in our apartment for the entire week. It does not need the Cocha. It does not need the Amazon. It does what it does anywhere it is alive. My blood sample is normal. There is nothing in my blood that is wrong. My hair sample is normal. The cells around the bulb of my hair are normal. The mark on my wrist is a surface mark only. It is in the epidermal layer. It is not in the dermis. It is not in any deeper tissue. The mark is a sign. It is not the thing itself. I do not know what the mark is for. I have a hypothesis. I will not tell you the hypothesis yet because I do not have evidence." I said, "Tell me anyway." She said, "No." I said, "Sarah." She said, "Mike, no. Not yet." She went back into her office. She did not come out for another 2 hours. I went to the kitchen window. I looked out at the backyard. The magnolia. The gas grill under its cover. The line of azaleas. It was August in New Orleans, and the air outside was the temperature of bath water, and the sky was the bright pale white it gets in August in the middle of the afternoon. The neighbor next door, Mrs. Boudreau, was watering her tomato plants in her backyard. She was a 60-something widow who had been our neighbor for the 4 years we had lived in the house. She had a yellow plastic watering can, and she was holding it the way she always held it, by the handle, with the spout tipped low over the soil. She was humming. I could not hear the humming through the closed window, but I could see her mouth shape it. She seemed fine. She seemed like Mrs. Boudreau. I went back to the couch. Ruby came and put her head on my knee. On the 4th day home, Sarah burned the hair sample. She did it in the kitchen sink with a long-stemmed lighter and a piece of tinfoil. She burned the slide. She burned the cover slip. She washed the ashes down the disposal. She ran the disposal for a long minute. Then she went outside with the small portable microscope, and she put it in the trash bin at the curb. She did not bring the bin back in until the truck came in the morning. She did not burn her own slide that she had taken from her wrist tissue. I did not see her burn it. I did not see her destroy it. I did not see her bring it out of her office. I did not ask. On the seventh day, I went back to the Verizon store. The store was the same. The carpet was the same. The smell of the coffee from the back office was the same. Hal was the same. He hugged me, which Hal had never done before, and which was awkward because Hal was not a hugging man. He said, "Top seller." He said, "You earned it." He said, "Brazil." He whistled. I went out to the floor. I sold 3 lines and a hotspot and 1 new phone in the first hour. The new phone was an upgrade to a man named Deshaun, who had been my customer for 2 years and who liked to talk about football. I told him I had been in the Amazon. I told him the food had been bad. I told him the lodge had been amazing. I told him I had seen monkeys. I did not tell him about the Cocha. I did not tell him about Owen Pritchard. I did not tell him about Eligio. I did not tell him about Sarah's wrist. I sold him a phone. Deshaun shook my hand and said, "Welcome back, man." And I said, "Glad to be back, man." And that was the truth, and was also not the truth. And I did not know how to hold it, being both. I was the top seller of the district again in my second full week back. I had not lost my touch. I had not lost anything. I noticed that I was selling phones almost without effort. I noticed that I was reading customers a little faster than I had read them before. The way Owen Pritchard had set down his coffee cup, the way one customer's left hand stayed flat on the counter for a full minute while we talked, the way another customer's smile lingered 3 seconds longer than a smile should linger. I noticed it. I was telling myself I was just paying more attention, the way you pay more attention to faces after a long trip. I was telling myself a lot of things in those weeks. Sarah went back to the lab. On the same day, I went back to the store. She did not tell me what she was working on. She had moved her active project to one she had not been working on before. She had told her department chair she needed a sabbatical from the Parkinson's research for the rest of the academic year, and had been allowed to start an exploratory project of her own choosing. Tulane was very accommodating about it. Sarah was a senior research associate with grant money. Sarah was allowed to work on what she wanted to work on, as long as she kept publishing. She was not going to publish on this. I knew she was not going to publish on this. She was sealing it. She was studying it in private. She was, I think, looking for a way to stop it. I did not ask. I let her work. I made dinner most nights. I walked Ruby in the evenings. I sat on the porch swing and listened to the cicadas come up at sundown. The neighborhood was its normal August self. A neighbor across the street, Eddie, washed his truck on Saturdays. The teenage kid 2 doors down, Sammy Trahan, mowed his parents' lawn on Sundays. The Boudreaux across the street had their grandchildren over for a barbecue on a Saturday in the middle of August, and the sound of the kids running through the sprinkler in their front yard was the sound that I think most reminded me of being a kid myself. Sarah's wrist mark grew slowly. By the 3rd week home, it was the size of a small lime. By the 5th week, it was the size of a coaster. The pattern had become more complex. The lines were finer. There were patterns within patterns now. You could look at any small area of the mark and find a smaller pattern inside it, the way the coast of Louisiana has small bays inside its big bays. Sarah covered it with a long sleeve every day, even at home. She showered with a plastic wrap over it. She did not let me see it most of the time. When I did see it, I tried not to look at it too long. The pattern moved if you looked too long. I had learned that on the slide. I did not need to learn it again. She told me on a Sunday in the middle of September that the mark was not progressing into her tissue. The mark had stopped expanding the week before. The pattern was still changing within the boundaries of where it had reached, but the boundaries had not moved. She told me she had been taking very small biopsies with a dermal punch of her own tissue at the edges of the mark every 3 days. She told me the tissue at the edge was always normal. The tissue had no abnormal cells in it. The pattern existed only at the surface. The pattern was, she said, almost like a tattoo, almost like a tag. She said the word tag, and then she stopped. I said, tag for what? She said, I have a hypothesis. I do not have evidence. I said, tell me. She said, no. She went to her office. She did not come out for the rest of the night. In late September, 2 of my neighbors got sick. Mrs. Boudreau first. She was diagnosed with what her doctor called a long viral infection. Her son told me that at the curb when he came over to pick up her mail one day. She would be fine, he said. She just needed rest. She had stopped going to her bridge club. She had stopped watering her tomatoes. She had stopped doing a lot of things. Eddie across the street was second. His wife told me he had been having dizzy spells. They thought it was vertigo, she said. The ear, nose, and throat doctor had not found anything. They were going to see a neurologist. I told Sarah. Sarah said nothing. Sarah's face did not change. I knew her face. The face she did not change was a face she was holding still on purpose. She said only, have they been to the Amazon? I said, no. She said, have they been near anyone who has been? I said, just us. She said, yes. In the second week of October, the teenage kid 2 doors down, Sammy Trahan, stopped mowing the lawn. His mother told me at the mailbox that he had been spending most of his time in his bedroom. She thought it was a depression thing. He was 15. Lots of 15-year-olds got like that, she said. He just needed to talk to someone. He had a counselor he was supposed to start seeing the next week. That night I sat on the porch swing and looked across the street at Eddie's house. Eddie was sitting in a lawn chair in his front yard. He had been sitting there since dinner. He was not doing anything. He was just sitting in the lawn chair with his hands folded in his lap looking out at the street. I went back inside. I went into Sarah's office without knocking. Sarah was at her desk. She had her laptop closed. She was looking at the wall. She had her left sleeve rolled up. The mark on her wrist had crept up her forearm in the last 2 weeks, the same surface-only kind of mark, but covering more area now, almost to her elbow. She was looking at the pattern. She was looking at it without expression. I said, Sarah, look at me. She looked at me. Her eyes were her eyes. I said, how many people in the neighborhood? She said, I do not know. I have not been counting them all, because I cannot see into every house. I have counted 7 that I can see from our porch. Mrs. Boudreau, Eddie, Eddie's wife now too, Sammy Trahan, Sammy's father, I think, though I am less sure about him, the woman who walks the small dog at the end of the block, Mr. Aucoin 2 houses down on the left. I said, Mr. Aucoin. She said, he is on his porch most nights now. He used to read on the porch. He is not reading anymore. He is just sitting. I said, Sarah. She said, Mike. I said, how? She said, I do not know how. I have a hypothesis. I do not have evidence. The hypothesis is that the pattern on my wrist is not a wound. The pattern on my wrist is a transmitter. The pattern is communicating very faintly with the matter the tool is made of, in some way I cannot detect with anything I have access to. The pattern is in me, but it is not me, and it is not damaging me, and it does not need me dead or alive. The pattern is a beacon. The pattern is letting the tool know where I am. The pattern is letting the tool find what it needs. The tool needed me to leave. The tool needed me to bring it home. The tool was always going to use me. The tool used Owen Pritchard's lodge as a way station. The tool needed a population it had not had access to. We were the population. I was the right person for it. I was a neurobiologist, married to a top sales representative, living in a residential neighborhood in a large American city. I was the perfect carrier. The tool let me leave because the tool wanted me to leave. The tool let me get all the way home, and then it started. I said, where in our neighbors did it start? She said, in the soil, in the air, in the dust of our clothes when we came back, in the suitcase, in our hair. I do not know. It started before we got home. It started on the boat to the marina in Manaus. It started on the plane. It is in our house. It has been in our house since we walked in. It is not enough of it to take all of us at once. It is being patient. It is doing what it does. It is laying down patterns on whoever it can reach. The neighbors are early because they were close. It will be the rest of the street next, then the rest of the city. I do not have evidence for any of this except for what I am seeing. I am sorry, Mike. I am sorry. I should not have asked you to get the hair. I said, you did not bring it home. We did. Both of us did. She said, I touched the slide. You did not touch the slide. The mark would have been on you by now if you had brought it home. You did not. I did. I am the carrier. I am the index case. There is going to be a federal investigation in 8 to 10 months, and they are going to come find me. They will not understand what they are looking at. They will look at me, and they will look at my husband, and they will look at our neighborhood, and they will not see what is doing this, because what is doing this is not anything they have a category for. They will look for a virus. They will look for a bacteria. They will look for a prion. They will not find any of those. They will not know what to call this. They will call it something. The name they call it will be wrong. The name they call it will be a name we both have to learn to use. We will be patients for the rest of our lives. I will be a famous patient. You will be the husband of a famous patient. There will be a Wikipedia article. There will be a foundation. The foundation will be named something the foundation thinks is hopeful and brave. The foundation will be a way of pretending that the thing it is named for can be defeated by raising money. She stopped. She breathed. She said, and the whole time I will be the carrier. I will not turn the way Owen turned, because the tool has other plans for me. I am useful to it intact. I will live a long life. I will write papers about what is happening to me. The papers will not say what the papers should say, because I will not be able to make the papers say what they should say. The pattern in me will not let me. The pattern is not making me lie. The pattern is making it impossible for me to find the right words. The right words will go around the truth like water around a rock. I have been trying to find them for 3 weeks. The closer I get, the harder the words are to write down. Look. She opened her laptop. She turned the screen toward me. There was a document on the screen. The document had her name at the top. It had a date. It had nothing else. The page was blank. She said, I have been opening this every night for 3 weeks. I have been trying to type one sentence. I cannot do it. The sentence I have been trying to type is the sentence, what is happening here is not a disease, it is an instrument, and I cannot make my hands type those words. My hands will not do it. The pattern will not let them. I am telling you the words right now because I can say them out loud. I cannot write them down. I tried earlier to write you a letter. The letter came out as a recipe for the gumbo my grandmother used to make. I do not know how to make my grandmother's gumbo. I do not have my grandmother's recipe. The recipe was wrong in places. The pattern wrote a recipe through my hand instead of the letter I was trying to write. I do not know what to do with that. I sat down on the floor of her office. I sat down because my legs were not working right. I sat on the floor, and I looked up at her in the desk chair. She looked down at me. She put her hand on my hair. The hand on the back of my head was the hand of the woman I had married. It was her hand. The pattern was on the other arm. I told myself that. I knew it was not the comfort I was trying to make it. She said, I am going to do everything I can to figure out how to stop it. I am going to do it from the inside. I am the only person who has a chance of doing it because I am the only one who can think about it and not have the pattern interfere yet. The pattern is interfering with the writing. The pattern is not interfering with the thinking yet. I do not know how long that will last. I am going to use every minute of clear thinking I have. You are going to keep being you. You are going to keep going to work. You are going to keep walking Ruby. You are going to be the person who watches the neighborhood and counts. You are going to be the person who keeps a journal of what is happening on this street. The journal will be the evidence. The journal will be the thing that exists when the foundation gets named. The journal is what I cannot make. You can make it. You are not infected. You are not marked. You can write. You will write. I said, Sarah, she said, you have to write it, Mike. You are the only one who can. You will not say it correctly. You will get half of it wrong. That does not matter. You will write the half of it you get right, and the half you get right is more than zero. Zero is what we have now. I said, I am not a writer. She said, you sell phones. You talk to 20 strangers a day. You read people. You see things. You have noticed what Owen was doing before I did. You noticed the dragonfly on the white stones the first day. You noticed the lack of birds before I did. You notice, write what you notice. She put her hand on my face. She said, you are going to be okay. We are both going to be okay in the only way it is still possible for us to be okay. We are going to be honest with each other for the rest of our lives. That is the only thing I can promise. That is the only thing I want. I said, okay. The first week of October was hot, the way October in New Orleans is hot, which is August, with the light gone wrong, a thinner light, an afternoon that ended an hour earlier than it should have. Mr. Aucoin stopped going to his mailbox. The woman with the small dog at the end of the block stopped walking the dog. The dog stayed in the yard and did not bark. I do not know if the dog was fed. I did not go to check. I had come to be afraid of ceiling fans. The fan in the bedroom turned in the same slow rhythm the fan in the bungalow had turned, and I lay under it most nights with my eyes open, watching it cut the light from the window into slow, wide arcs that fell across the bed and across Sarah and across me. I would have taken the fan down, except Sarah did not want me to. Sarah said the fan made her feel like she was somewhere else. I did not ask her where else. On the third Tuesday in October, I woke up at 3:20 in the morning, the same time I had woken up the first night at the lodge. I had been waking up at 3:20 about twice a week since we got back home. The clock by the bed read 3:20 every time. It was always 3:20. I did not know what to make of it. Sarah was not next to me in the bed. I got up. I went to the kitchen. The kitchen was dark. Sarah was not in the kitchen. I went down the hall to her office. Her office was empty. I went to the front door. The front door was locked. I went to the back door. The back door was unlocked. The screen was unlatched. I stepped out onto the back patio. Our backyard was small. It had the magnolia tree at the back. It had the gas grill under the cover. It had the line of azaleas. It had a small patch of grass in the middle. We had had a thunderstorm earlier that evening, a normal August storm that lasted maybe 20 minutes, and there was a puddle in the middle of the patch of grass that had not yet drained. The puddle was about 8 feet across and 3 or 4 inches deep. The puddle had been bigger when the storm ended. It had drained some. Sarah was standing in the middle of the puddle, ankle deep. She had on the white cotton nightgown she had been wearing in bed. Her feet were bare. Her hands were at her sides. Her head was tipped down. She was looking at the water around her feet. She was not moving. I crossed the patio. I crossed the grass. I came up to the edge of the puddle. I said her name. I said her name 3 times. She did not look at me. She did not lift her head. She kept looking at the puddle. I heard a sound from the front of our house. A screen door. The Boudreaux screen door across the street. It slapped shut. I knew the sound of it the way I knew the sound of my own front door. Then there was another. Eddie's house. The kid 2 doors down. Then a third. Down the block. I did not know which house. A fourth. Closer. I heard the slap of a screen door I did not recognize. Behind me. Somewhere on our own block. Mrs. Boudreaux's friend, maybe. The woman who had moved in 2 years ago. The doors opened and closed up and down the block. I stood on the edge of the puddle with my wife standing in it, and I listened to the sound of doors. I could not tell how many doors I heard. I think more than 10. I think it was every house on the block that I could hear from where I was standing. Then the doors stopped. Then I heard footsteps. The footsteps were not running. The footsteps were walking. Many footsteps. The footsteps were going down driveways and across lawns and around to backyards. I could not see the footsteps. The fences between the yards were too high. I heard them. The footsteps were unhurried. The footsteps were going to puddles. There were puddles all over the neighborhood from the storm. I looked down at Sarah's feet in the puddle in front of me. The puddle was still. The puddle was so still that the moon, which had come out from behind the last of the storm clouds, was reflected in the water around Sarah's ankles exactly, a perfect white disk, not broken up by any ripple. The pattern on Sarah's wrist was a darker shape against the white of her nightgown. The pattern was not still. The pattern was moving, very slowly, the way the pattern on the slide had moved. She lifted her head. She looked at me. She smiled. It was her smile. It was the smile I had been married to. She said, "Come stand with me, Mike." I did not move. She said, You can stand here. It does not hurt." The moon on the water around her feet was perfect. It was still. The whole street was still. The whole street was standing in puddles, or in pools, or in pet water bowls, or in tubs they had filled, or wherever water was. I knew that, and I had not seen any of it yet. I said, "Sarah." "No." She said, "Mike." She said it the way she had said my name 1,000 times, with her own voice, the voice that had cried in the parking lot on the day I had won the trip, the voice that had asked Owen Pritchard about the birds, the voice that had said no in her office. It was her voice. I said, "Not tonight." She did not say anything. She kept smiling. She kept looking at me. She did not lift her foot out of the water. She did not step toward me. I stepped back. I stepped back off the grass and onto the patio. I went into the house. I locked the back door. I locked the screen. I went to the kitchen. I sat down at the kitchen island. Ruby was at my feet. She was not howling. She was not whimpering. She was not afraid. She slept with her head on my left foot. I was grateful for her. I was grateful for the ceiling fan above the dining table, the one I had come to be afraid of, because it was on and it covered some of what was outside. From somewhere down the block came the same sound from the night we had come down the stream in the canoe, the soft entering of bodies into still water at the same time. Not one body, many. Not one yard, many. It was so quiet. I sat at the kitchen island and I listened. The pattern on Sarah's wrist had been the same pattern that had been on the slide. The pattern on the slide had come from the village. The village had come from the Cocha. The Cocha was on the other side of the equator. The Cocha was almost 4,000 miles from my kitchen. It did not matter how far it was. It was here. Through the kitchen window, over the sink, I could see the moon. It was bright. It was full. The puddle in the backyard would be holding the moon in it. Sarah would be looking at the moon in the puddle. The whole street, all the puddles in all the yards I could not see from where I was sitting would be holding the moon, all of them perfectly, not a ripple in any. I sat at the island until the sky began to gray. The sound of bodies entering water had stopped at some point I could not place. The neighborhood was quiet. The cicadas had stopped. I had not noticed when the cicadas had stopped. I got up. I went to the back door. I did not unlock it. I looked through the small window above the latch. Sarah was still in the puddle. The puddle had not drained any further. The moon had moved across the sky and was no longer on the water around her feet. The water around her feet was just water again. Black. Still. Sarah lifted her head. She was looking at the window. She was looking at me through the window. She was smiling. She did not motion. She did not call out. She kept smiling. She kept her hands at her sides. She kept her feet in the water. I stood at the window. I did not move. I did not open the door. I did not call out either. The dawn came up around her, in the backyard, the way the dawn had come up around the Cocha that first morning. She did not move either. She did not need to. The Cocha had been patient. So was she.